Molweni, goeienaand, good evening. My name is Azwindini Muronga. I am the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Internationalization here at Nelson Mandela University. I am here to do the welcome to you all and those who are online. Deputy Vice Chancellors who are here, Executive Deans of Faculty. In particular, I would like to convey my special greetings to the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, the Built Environment and Technology, Professor Marshall Sheldon, whose faculty is an academic home to Professor Mbanga, who is our celebrant tonight. Colleagues from Faculty of Engineering who are here today, in particular the Department of Built and Human Settlement in the School of Built Environment and Civil Engineering. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Our professoriate and all members of the academy present here today, members of the senior management, MANCO, our students, alumni and alumni association, our honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. I recognize that this is also a very special time for family members to join in the celebration, given the various kinds of support they have given to our colleague, Professor Mbanga, throughout his journey. Some of them are here with us in person, and some of those who could not join the proceedings are joining on our various live stream platforms, and we welcome them as well. I particularly wish to acknowledge and welcome Professor Mbanga's mother, Ms. Masango Mildred Mbanga, while also acknowledging Professor Mbanga's late father, Mvulo. Both parents are credited for instilling the value of education in Professor Mbanga. It is my honor to welcome Ms. Mbanga here tonight while also acknowledging that Mvulo, the patriarch, is also with us in spirit. I also wish to acknowledge and welcome Sijekula Mbanga, who is here to offer special support, as well as to witness her husband's induction into the professoriate. We heartily welcome you, Mama. Please also allow me to welcome the rest of the family who are also present. Professor Mbanga's daughter, Ms. Abulele Mbanga, the grandsons, Siwapiwe, Hindipile, and Enzo Kuhle, they are also here with us. The siblings and Amamiya family, Sikabai and Nyataza families, they are also here. We welcome them. Madheve, Mshetwa, and the Kaveni families, we are also welcoming them. Mrs. Polly Santatla, Professor Mbanga's primary school teacher, we welcome her also. Mr. Mkokeleli Ndude, a retired social worker and family friend, also welcome. Professor Hethanel, the master's and doctoral degree supervisor, welcome Hethanel. Prof. Kishore Raga, doctoral co-supervisor, also welcome. Our friends from Ntsongeni village and Tsomo community, some of whom are also present here today, we welcome you too. Professor Mbanga is being inducted into the professoriate today as a recognition for his lifelong contribution to the scholarship in the structure and behavior of human settlement systems, including the processes that underlie the changing pattern of human settlements. His topic here tonight is human settlements are much more than housing, towards a transformative theory and practice for sustainable futures. Implicit in this topic, which we will hear soon, is the paradigm shift from provision of traditional housing units, as had been the case with the RDPs, to a more holistic view of human settlements, with a wide variety of options explored, and ranging from basic housing units to social housing that is inclusive of rental accommodation offered at competitive and affordable rates. Early this week, the Minister of Housing, Honorable Mamloko Kupai, on the occasion to mark the World Habitat Day and to launch the Human Settlements Research Strategy, issued a call for collaborative efforts, including adding weight to the government's research agenda on human settlements. Perhaps as a way to illustrate how serious and dire the human settlement matter is, one only needs to look at the current national statistics in terms of the ever-growing demand and our capacity in meeting the growing demands. In responding to a parliamentary question last year on the same issue, the Minister of Human Settlements conceded to Parliament that there are 2.4 million households and individuals in the National Housing Needs Register awaiting for assistance, 2.4 million. With Gauteng accounting for at least 1.03 million of the total, and Eastern Cape, the second highest, with over 600,000 individuals and households listed on the register and awaiting assistance. Professor Mbanga, we are honored that at this point in your career, you have chosen to remain as part of Nelson Mandela University family. Thank you for that. We are proud of your achievements, and we are eagerly looking forward to listening to your talk tonight. We congratulate you on your outstanding achievement. Being promoted to the level of full professor is the pinnacle of achievement as a scholar and as a solid affirmation by your peers of your lifelong work. I now, honored guests, request the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, the Built Environment and Technology, Professor Marshall Sheldon, to introduce Professor Mbanga to the congregation.
Deputy Vice-Chancellors, the executive and senior management of the institution, deans and deputy deans, professoriate, all the academics and past staff, esteemed colleagues, students, and specifically the honored guest, family and friends of Professor Mbanga, as welcomed by the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, and everybody online joining us this evening. As the Executive Dean of the faculty, it is both an honor and a privilege to stand before you this evening to introduce a remarkable scholar whose contributions to human settlement and sustainable development are truly inspiring. Professor Mbanga, a professor and a chair of human settlement within the faculty, has dedicated his career to advancing knowledge and practice in this very vital field. He began his educational journey at Zakele Primary School in Chomu and matriculated from Chomu Senior Secondary School in 1987, excelling in mathematics, physical science, and biology. Faced with challenges to finance his tertiary education immediately, he then spent 2 years teaching mathematics and general sciences at local schools and within the community, while pursuing his passion for education. His determination led him to enroll in a Bachelor of Public Administration and Industrial Psychology degree at the University of South Africa, which he completed with several distinctions. His professional journey saw him rise through the ranks within the Eastern Cape Provincial Administration, where he contributed to various government departments. While advancing his career, Professor Mbanga continued his academic pursuits, earning a Master of Public Administration with distinction in 2005, followed by a Doctor of Philosophy in Public Administration in 2011. Both of these at the Nelson Mandela, then Metropolitan University. His doctoral thesis focused on intergovernmental planning, showcasing his commitment to impactful research. Professor Mbanga's academic journey began when he joined the Nelson Mandela University in 2015 as an associate professor and chair for human settlement development and management. Since joining the university, he has supervised 65 honors, 18 masters, and 9 doctoral students to completion. I think some of them are in the audience tonight. He has also hosted and mentored 6 postdoctoral research fellows drawn from different disciplinary backgrounds, but all related to the development and management of human settlement. Professor Mbanga has published both nationally and internationally, and he has published extensively in reputable journals and conferences. He's a reviewer for the NRF rating applications and serves as the NRF panel for Saatchi Chair evaluations. He's a guest editor and reviewer in housing, built environment, and urban development journals, and he has co-authored 3 books in the last 5 years. Notably, he has co-edited an upcoming book titled Housing the Nation for Sustainable Cities in the South that will be released shortly. Over his 9 years at the university, Professor Mbanga has developed and implemented short learning programs that have benefited municipal officials, councillors, and different stakeholders, enhancing the delivery of human settlement. Professor Mbanga is actively engaged in public policy development and serves as an expert reviewer for the South Africa 30-year review report, highlighting his influence in shaping discourse within the human settlement. He actively serves on numerous government and industry advisory panels and is currently the board chairman of the Institute of Human Settlement Practitioners in South Africa. He also serves on the board of governors of the US-Africa Collaborative and has recently been appointed to the program committee of the Chartered Institute of Building to lead a CIB commission on affordable housing, informal settlement, and water and sanitation. Among his many accolades, in 2023, Professor Mbanga received the faculty's Research Excellence Award, and also in 2023, Professor Mbanga received the USA National Association of Housing and Development Officials International Research and Global Exchange Award. Among his many active and inspiring international engagement projects, I'd like to highlight just 2 of those tonight. The first is Ndlambe Ecosun Green Village, which aims to integrate sustainable practices into informal settlements in the Eastern Cape. This project, yes. This project is supported by the DSI and CSIR and is done in collaboration with collaborators in Germany. The second project I'd like to highlight is the Affordable Housing and Real Estate Development Global Classroom that is implementing in partnership with the University of Maryland in the USA as a flagship initiative in the USA-Africa Collaborative. As if all of that is not sufficient. As a lifelong learner, Professor Mbanga is currently pursuing a higher education study at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, aiming to complete a second doctoral degree in higher education management, further demonstrating his commitment to continuous personal and professional growth. Professor Mbanga, on behalf of the Department of Human Settlement Development, Building and Human Settlement Development, and all the students in the department, they extend their heartfelt gratitude and congratulate you on your professorial inauguration. I open the quote, "The significant milestone highlights your dedication and significant contributions in the field of human settlements. Your leadership inspires us all, and we look forward to the advancements you will bring to our department and the wider academic community." That's from your HOD on behalf of the department. An extract from some of the many student messages we received. I open the quote. "Your inaugural lecture is an inspiration to all aspiring scholars and a source of pride for the entire department," from one of your students. And then just a short message from one of our professors retiring soon within the faculty. And I think you read this earlier today. He says, "I welcome you to the world of full professors, a space in which I believe we should do more thinking and less talking, so that when we talk, people listen and action our ideas." I think you know where that's from. I'll share with you the full messages we received, Prof. Mbanga, after. But in closing, Prof. Mbanga's motto, "Born for this, so we rise by uplifting others." That motto embodies his dedication to uplifting communities through education and sustainable development. Colleagues, everyone here present, please join me in inviting Professor Mbanga, a scholar whose work continues to inspire and lead change in our society, to the stage to deliver his inaugural lecture.
Thank you very much, Professor Marshall Seldom, for that introduction. It's an exciting moment, but at the same time, equally an emotive space. One of the difficult things really in life is to listen to your story being read in your presence. For many a times, such stories are read when you may not be able to engage or do anything about whatever is being said. But most importantly, the introduction also triggers some elements of your path, which you might have thought at some points you have overcome, but they are all quite important to take you forward still. Thank you so much, Professor Sheldon, for that. Good evening, Molweni, Dumelang, Sanbonani. I want to recognize the acting Vice Chancellor of the Nelson Mandela University, the Deputy Vice Chancellors who have honored this occasion, this ceremony, the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, Building Development and Technology, Professor Marshall Sheldon, and also to recognize other Executive Deans from other faculties in the university who are part of this ceremony, and some might be participating virtually as well. To other deputy deans, Professor Dalenga Potters, and other deans of other faculties as well. And I would also want to recognize the leadership from the government sector and the industry. I managed to have a glimpse of the deputy mayor of the Executive Deputy Mayor of the Mandela Bay Metropolis, and also the MSc, who has also honored this occasion at this point in time for human settlements. I will also recognize also other important the mayors, and some of the mayors, acting mayors, are also part of this event from the Eastern Cape, and other members of the local government sphere, and also the human settlement family as it is. I got a glimpse of the board chairman of the Property Professional Legal Authority as well in this occasion. Colleagues in the academy, friends, and my family, also community members from Tsongani villages already recognized by the Executive Dean. The Tsomo community. I was born in a community. I'm a son of a community. I was raised in my family, but in a community. And also the inside municipality broadly, who I understand also somehow connecting also virtually for this occasion. I also stand to recognize my research collaborators, engagement collaborators. It seems to be not only about research collaboration, and also teaching and learning collaborators in other parts of the continent, and also in Europe and USA, as already indicated by Professor Marshall Sheldon. I will seek, I think, at this moment also to also do two things at this point, I think, before I proceed to the lecture. The title of this lecture is about human settlements are much more than housing, towards a transformative theory and practice for sustainable futures. But before I do that, I also want to express some thanks before I proceed to the lecture itself. First, to the Almighty God, the creator of our being, for bestowing upon me an opportunity and a privilege to be someone in the world and in the universe, who has been the light, the lamp to my feet, and the light to my paths. And if it were not for the Creator, I may not have been standing here to deliver this lecture today. My story has been read when I left the gates of Somo High School in 1987. I had no clue, even the slightest idea of what my future would be like, for the reasons already indicated. Not that there weren't people who were trying to provide support. There was guidance. There was everything in the school guiding us as learners on opportunities that are out there. I had applied for bursaries everywhere else, but unfortunately all of them were coming back with some regrets. We regret. there was no explanation of what they regret, what is the reason for regretting or declining the application. But I learned later that triggered my interest as to how is it possible in our space to have a situation where we are financially needy, at the same time, you are academically deserving, as we say in our academy, therefore financially needy as well. But also your performance is indicating a need for support. But the third issue was that I thought at the age of 16 that maybe that I'm also living with a disability might have been a motivator for me to secure these bursaries. I learned later that that was not going to be possible in the political context that we're in as a country at that time. I will leave that to that. But as I left the gates of Samoa High School, I knew one thing. That's into enye. That is, I will become someone in life. At that point, I began to read beyond mathematics formulae and science, Newton's laws. I had to read further beyond to get scripts on the law side of things itself, but to read also on psychology side of things. But I found at some point someone who was also talking about in the reading of it's called A Logotherapy Guide by Terria Chantel in her writing The Quest for Destiny, where she says that somewhere in the reading, the secret of every man's being, in my case, person, is not only to live, but to have something to live for. I had to find a purpose of living. That was what I committed myself to in the beginning of my journey. I just want to highlight that, and also to thank the people who were with me at that time, providing support. The late advocate Robert Dilizo from Somo, Mr. Nduda has been cited already, who were providing guidance, support, encouragement. One colleague was saying before the lecture right now, we're taking photos that encouragement alone is not enough. My primary school teacher is here, Mrs. Ntlantla, and though that encouragement was useful to propel me to the future. I want us to thank those. At the same time, I would also want to speak to my mother at this point in time. I will request the university to indulge me in speaking to my family. Sango ndiyabulela ngakho konke okwenzileyo empilweni yami. Utata kasekho yena, kodwa ke nikunye ningakhange nikwazi ukuyithola indlela yokuba nifunde nina. Nahlala nisithundeza njalo ukuthi siye esikolweni. Utata wandakhela isitulo esebenzisa umthi. Eso situlo eso saba yidesika yami yokufunda. Waze wandakhela isibane esebenzisa itoti. Isibane eso sasebenzisa iparafini njengephawa. Eso sibane eso ke dandisilayita ngamaxesha onke ngorhatya. Ndihlale kule tafile ndifunde. Lonto ke Sango yakwenzela umsebenzi wona umane ujonga uba ayitshina inwele zami ezimhlophe. Ndine blonde hair kaloku. Noma ube nomsebenzi ukutshekisha impumlo zami kusasa xa ndiye esikoleni ba azinawo na umsi. My father, Emma, I want to tunnel this to your direction in our coming project on engineering timber frame as a solution for human settlements in South Africa. That project, the reason why I'm attached to it, has something to do with the wooden chair that my late father built for me. It might be that wooden chair, that wood is what we call it timber today. And we have proceeded with research in engineering the timber as a solution for intervening in housing deficits across the globe. That project has got a significance, I think, because of that. You might be wondering why I continue to talk about that project as it has to move. I will dispense on that. My siblings have been thanked already, my primary school teachers as well, and also the community. But also, I've also, as has been provided in the summary of the CV, worked in the administration. I also want to thank my colleagues. Some of them are here, who I've worked with in various government departments and entities, and in particular, my office support officials. Some of them by now have acquired directorship positions, and some of them are in business practice. We're providing support to my office and therefore to my becoming. As I'm going to move into the topic itself, without taking much time, I would also want to dedicate this topic to my father. But before I get into the lecture itself, I will also request an indulgence for the university, because I believe it might be important to do it, to also speak in a minute to people living with disabilities as well, and those who are living with albinism. In a society that seems to continue to exclude others in the mainstream of everything else that is happening. My message to the people living with disabilities today, not only in South Africa but across the globe, and in particular those who are living with disabilities, it is possible. But the secret of the possibility is in each of us, people living with disabilities, taking the first step. You require to take the first step. I found that the structure of society is such that it may not easily accommodate you. You won't be invited to the table because naturally so. You must find your way steadily into the direction of the table. If they don't provide you a chair in the table, bring your own chair. If they don't provide you, you can't find a chair around you, your wheelchair is equally important, usable in the table. If they leave the table itself because they have joined, continue with the meeting, chair and be a scriber in the meeting, and take decisions that will bring a change in the order of society. People with disabilities, it is time to rise. Thank you very much. Just today, I had a bit of a challenge in terms of getting into the topic itself. What could be the relevant topic that I would need to speak to today? I had a bit of a difficulty in the sense that there are many issues related to human settlements, and there are challenges, as having expressed also by the acting Vice-Chancellor in the opening, relating to housing deficits. And these housing deficits are taking different forms, like variants. As we have learned from the coronavirus, they have mutations. These urban challenges we're faced with. But then I ended up coming to a topic that would somehow be broad, but with some element of depth. I'm doing a first disclaimer to the scholars that the topic I selected is a bit broad, but in it there is an element of depth, but that depth won't be found through a single specialization. The reason was because of what I'll be explaining, I think, in the lecture itself. I thought maybe it's important for us at this point to take a bit of a pause around sustainable development, housing, and human settlement. Do a little reflection and even do a bit of a check on the work that we are doing as scholars, as practitioners, as policymakers at the same time. I thought it might be useful to do that. How I then sought to do this, or I propose this evening for us to do this, is one, to answer some questions. Questions of why this topic has been selected for this lecture. And maybe from there, looking on what are human settlements and where do they originate from. I thought it might be important for us to do that in answering, in coming close to this question around human settlements, because many a times we speak of human settlements as in housing, and in my view, human settlements are much more than housing. And again, maybe in doing so, having understood what human settlements are first and where do they originate from, also consider the theoretical foundations of our thinking, the very thinking that the colleague was speaking about. I think this early morning we couldn't join this lecture in person. What influences even our thoughts about human settlements, including our actions? I thought it would be important for us to do that. And also, what are the contemporary challenges? Having done that examination of what are the influences, what are the theoretical influences of our own thinking, because that thinking informs policy. It informs scholarship and policy. But what are those influences? Where choices have been made in policy, so that we can find a source of some of the maladies that we are faced with human settlements in its broader sense, and housing as a component of that. But again, after doing that, I thought maybe it would be important, before concluding this lecture, to speak to some of the contemporary challenges facing the human settlements, not only in South Africa, but maybe across the globe, and conclude by proffering some few suggestions on those challenges. Why this topic? Maybe that could be the second issue. Why has this topic been selected for this study? Several countries, as we know, are seemingly concerned with the challenges of urbanization. The flood tide of migrants that are finding their way into the cities. And these migrants, we not only say that they come from rural areas, but with the research we've learned that they also come from foreign bordering countries of different stakes. And some of these migrants to the city centers are moving from the borders of the same countries. If you look into the United States of America and finding their way down into where opportunities seem to reside. Maybe where we don't see rurality, we still observe urbanization, as it is called. But with that, seeking those opportunities and livelihoods, this appears to be limited understanding. Perhaps that was my concern around this topic, of the structure and the behavior of the human settlement systems, including the processes that underlie the changing patterns of human settlements. I found that as we proceed with the scholarship, your research exploring innovations, leveraging on technologies, and equally our ongoing research, which influences or informs public policy, I then realize that as we proceed with that, we don't seem to be having what I consider as a coherent view of the theory and practice of human development management, not only in South Africa, but across the globe, for societies in transition. And these transitions include urbanization and other mega trends we're beginning to see across the globe. There does not seem to be a coherent view. I thought it may be important to take a pause and reflect on that area as well. The other reason, increased migration to urban centers to escape income inequality and poverty in rural areas leads to an increased rate of urbanization, which equally leads to an increased need for basic services such as housing, waterborne sewerage, electricity, waste removal. I think the authors like Gobel, they speak to that. But something for me, we understand that humans, people are migrating in search of these opportunities in hope of better quality of life in these areas, but then they put pressure on the receiving environments. What needs to be noted, I think, at this point, I think, in my view, is what are the pushing factors to the city centers, and whether solutions may not be lying on tackling the pushing factors. Whilst we deal with urbanization as it is, my interest on this assertion is not the challenge in the receiving centers, environments, but the challenge as it has arisen from the originating environments. That is where the source of the challenge is. We note that. That's the other issue that we note also, which has informed this topic as well. We understand that urbanization and its consequences is not only a South African problem, in that global trend of rapid urbanization has resulted in more than half of the world population of 7 billion people living in cities today. More than half of the world population lives in cities today, due to migration, as we understand it. According to the United Nations Habitat Program, UN Habitat, about 1 billion urban dwellers live in slums and informal settlements across the globe. And this number is projected to increase to 3 billion by 2030. So, in search of these opportunities, economic opportunities and livelihood, the reality out there is that the place of hope, as it is, does not seem to respond to the need to provide the intended outcome. Their aspirations are unmet once they reach the urban spaces, the people who migrate from rural, and also those who migrate from bordering countries. Hence the rise of on informal settlements and inner city slums. It is not only about informal settlements, the housing deficits as we see them across the globe. It includes the inner city slums that are currently deteriorating across the globe, where property owners are abandoning their properties in the major cities of the world, and those get occupied by those who are in need of shelter. So there is some kind of a cushioned or hidden need that we need to take care of. Of course, in other cities, we also observe homelessness practically through people who are dwelling in streets and under bridges. So urbanization has brought into those. The patterns, again, this is the world urbanization prospects as were done by 2011 by the UN that indicate what are the trends, urbanization trends across the globe in the major regions. And as already indicated that by 2030, and we see to increasing urbanization, and by 2050, the major regions and continents of the globe will be urbanized. I think we also need to note that. Having noted that, the issue about urbanization is also about unplanned urbanization, which has fueled increase in the number of informal settlement. The challenge facing cities today is not only about the demands placed to them for basic services, but the challenge facing cities is their inability to plan for the flood tide of migrants to their cities today. That is the challenge that confronts cities, and that is a challenge for human settlement as well. And one of the authors, Rawat, observes that housing affordability is not just about a house price, but a function of access to and availability of work. Those who make their ways to the cities, to the urban centers, with the hope that they'll secure some kind of work, end up not securing work. And instead being faced with transport costs, rising food costs, education costs, ability to access health services, and energy costs in the city centers as well. I spoke earlier on about paraffin-fueled energy provision, wood-fueled in the rural areas. But in the city, you need to work within what can be provided within the city, and all other living costs. So housing affordability is about an inability for them to secure work, to can meet their basic needs once they arrive in the city. The health of individuals equally is intricately linked to the health of the natural systems in which they live. Shelter and security are the core elements of housing and human settlements. But importantly, health equally depreciates, I think, as people are living on environments that are not health promoting. That has also come as a challenge, I think, in the studies. Today, the world, as if that is not enough, the world today is faced by other big issues or mega trends. One of them is climate change, and for Africa, population growth, as Africa has a young population. Of course, we see that there is population decline in other parts of the world. Your US and Europe are currently confronted with population decline due to low fertility rates and an aging population. But for Africa, challenges are likely to be different into the future. The pressure for human settlements is bound to rise as the population is much younger as the rest of the globe. But the second challenge that required me or influenced me to choose this topic is about climate change. Urbanization, climate change. With climate change, the countries and cities currently are faced with huge crises, as we have observed. The effects of climate change, which are devastating, rolling heat waves, heavy rains, floods, heavy snowfalls, tropical cyclones, as we have observed, and prolonged droughts, as we've experienced even in this region over the past 7 years. And they are still coming back in terms of the protections. These have got devastating impacts on vulnerable communities. This is the second challenge that cities and national governments are confronted with. And the 2018 report of the UN has provided information regarding those cities, looking at cities by population size from 300,000 to 10 million, and which cities are prone to which natural disasters and how many natural disasters. These reports are indicating what cities are living with today and are likely to live with into the future, which governments, national governments, and cities must respond to. This is central to human settlements and where people are staying. This is a reason, with these mega trends and challenges, we found ourselves, not only as scholars, but including policymakers, as I observe, in a mode of fixing the broken window. Piecemeal approaches that are less coordinated, dealing with issues as they come. And I felt that perhaps this lecture might present an opportunity to trigger a national and global conversation towards a more coherent view of human settlements and how then that view should inform public policy and ongoing research. That has been. Maybe without taking much time, I may proceed at this point with that rationale into what are these theories. Maybe first, just talk about human settlements, because in my view, I had a sense that maybe our fixing the broken window might be as a consequence of having lost the real meaning of a human settlement. It might be that we have lost that along the way. and that there is a call for that. In the process of developing the white paper for human settlements in South Africa, which is making its way to the cabinet for approval, as pronounced by the Minister of Human Settlements in the course of this week, as we're working through the chapters of the white paper, there was this emphasis and these intentions across scholars as we're engaged in different chapters. At some point, we came to a point with the policy unit of having negotiation sessions, trying to engage each other for trade-offs around what should this white paper be addressing. What are human settlements? My sense is that if we had a current view on what human settlements are, we wouldn't be in these struggles as we seem to be. Both as scholars, that's where the issue is, both as scholars whose research is expected to inform public policy and implementation, we shouldn't be in struggle. We need to find each other in that space. What are human settlements first? Because human settlements are not housing. They are not housing. What are human settlements? What are the elements of human settlements? But I then thought, let us just take a moment briefly to look into where do human settlements originate from. It was in 1970 where one architect and urban planner, Dr. Adis, made an important observation in saying that in order to create the cities of tomorrow, of the future, there is a need to systematically develop a science of human settlements. That was in 1970. The architect and urban planner, for us to create better cities of tomorrow, we shall require to develop systematically develop a science of human settlements. This science is termed acoustics, which will take into consideration the principles that men, my emphasis, human beings, consider when building his, in my emphasis, their settlements, as well as the evolution of human settlements through the history in terms of size and quality. Acoustics, as proffered by Dr. Adis, was a science we should be engaging since 1970. There has to be a dedicated science for human settlements. The view, again, around this science is that this science has an intention to build a city that respects human dimensions. Acoustics. This science, as Dr. Adis states, is that with technical development, which in his opinion is inevitable, human settlement agenda should rather be about how best to optimize the quality of interaction of human beings with their environment. The quality of interaction of human beings with their environment. This science should be focusing on that and check whether a science of better understanding human settlements in this way exists or should be generated. Later on, or just recently, not even later, Leros contends that there is no common global definition of what constitutes even an urban settlement, by the way. And most commonly, a city is referred to as an urban settlement in the space of urban development. So, again, there isn't a global definition of what a settlement is. We may perhaps pass that and look on the next view of polis, the origins of a city from Greek and Roman language, polis, as a community of citizens, the idea of society, and not just an urban space. As we're seeking to engage today, we seem to be dealing with urban dilemmas, urban deficiencies, urban complexities. The internal view was that the city itself, which even informs the scholarship of urban development, was derived or derives its origins from a city polis as a community of citizens. The whole issue around human dimensions of settlements. I will therefore in this lecture, when referring to a city, refer to it as a community of citizens. Maybe moving on this origin of human settlements, shelter, as we understand it, as a big issue and a basic need, itself is not just shelter as shelter, protection from harsh external forces and shocks only. It is equally a safety rest, a place where one gets into for safety and rest, and also to acquire comfort. A shelter itself, housing and a house itself is for safety. And also it is equally for comfort. So in the planning and design of even housing, without giving attention to human settlement, we need to achieve those quality standards. Secondly, shelter itself is also it provides a place for human cultural activities and social linkages. The shelter itself. It's important for us to note that even housing it's not just housing as a commodity, as a product, as a house. Its purpose of existence, its primary function is for safety, for comfort, and also to provide space for engaging in cultural activities and ensuring that there are social linkages within a community. Maybe just on the origins, because we're trying to track where human settlements come from. Archaeologists and geographers have both studied the ancient world. We understand that. And geographers have evaluated and analyzed land uses, identified the merits and demerits of settlements from early civilizations and their functional relationship with other geographical factors that geographers have been doing over time. My emphasis here is about land. There seems to be a sense that human settlements, they start with land. Land is a basis for human settlement to meet specific needs from the view of archaeologists. But then, what is it with land? Maybe would be our next issue to look at. Geographers have also evaluated the sequence of evolution of settlements in various zones with relevance to forms, purposes, considering the role of population and structural aspects around it that geographers have been doing over time. But I want just to move speedily in tracking the origin of a settlement from what Matamanda in the University of Free State in one study. He picks up a definition of human settlement from a Zimbabwe development policy, where it is viewed as a place where humans reside on a permanent basis. Human settlements, as we engage them, are seemingly places or spaces where people should reside, not other elements of the built environment. They originate, or their primary purpose of existence is anchored on human beings, not the other activities, not the other functions. That's what Mutamanda was also emphasizing relative to land use and land allocation, that primarily is because humans are in search of spaces to stay in and to live in. Maybe moving speedily in these definitions to the next definition, which is quite common and many countries have adopted in their national housing policies, is the one of the UN Habitat, the first international conference of 1976 in Vancouver, where human settlement is defined as a totality of human community, where the city, town, or village, with all its social, material, spiritual, and cultural elements that sustain it. So, a human settlement is a community, and it is a human community by the definition of the UN Habitat. Our approach to urban development and rural development should be premised on the understanding of who are we creating or recreating those spaces for. And those are human beings by the UN definition. Nairobi, maybe picking on some case studies, equally as a community of citizens in Kenya, was initially established in 1899 as a campsite for the Kenyan-Uganda railway contractors because there was abundance of fresh water and supply in the area where Nairobi is today. So there were economic activities and there were abundance of fresh water and supplies, food and any other supplies in the market, access to markets. And Nairobi was therefore born to respond to a human need primarily. And then it grew into a city later on. Human settlements therefore primarily are created and recreated for human beings. We then move to the next one, Cape Town equally, a community of citizens in South Africa with its origin in 1952, of course with the Dutch East India Company established. The issue again here was that the Dutch East Indian Company were passing through with ships because of trade to Asia. They found a space in Cape Town to settle because there was also access to well-watered and fertile soil. We also understand that maybe this explanatory is debatable in the context of who are the original settlers in Cape Town, for instance. We understand, but the emphasis in this lecture is on the purpose. Why people chose to settle in that area. We'll move also to the next case study, Lagos. Another community of citizens in Nigeria initially emerged as a port city with its lakes as we understand them, and also the maritime opportunities around the lakes in Lagos. But it was the main center of the Portuguese. Note though that the area was originally known as Oba, inhabited by the Indias, Yoruba, Ewe, and Ogu people. These people, the Awori people, around the place, the community of citizens we call today Lagos, were landowners, they were farmers, and they were fishermen. People who inhabited that space originally were farmers and fishermen, and they found an opportunity to develop and redevelop that area into what later on became a community of citizens and is called a city. Maybe to conclude on these cases, I mean, just take Gqeberha, formerly Port Elizabeth in South Africa, another community of citizens, which was established around 1820 as a formal British settlement and incorporated the town in 1861. Of course, named after the wife of the governor of the Cape Colony. But important again around this city, as we understood, as a coastal city again, opportunities were found along maritime opportunities were found as a source. And of course, Port Elizabeth grew later on into manufacturing sector as we see multipliers from the maritime economy as it is. I will conclude on this case. Again, other scholars have picked the coastlines. If we take Gobel again, we looked on the KwaZulu-Natal coastline settlements, where did they originate from? Some of these sites were inside the coastal area, caves used for shelter and access to natural resources. Over many centuries, I think it has been proven that research, archaeologists, that the alluvial floodplains and availability of water influence selection of coastal sites for early agriculture, while with the advent of trades, both ships, commerce trades, and tourism further influence settlement patterns. But the coastline settlements were initially for agriculture because of the richness of the soil. People found those spaces for agriculture, human beings. I didn't mention this, perhaps as a disclaimer, that as we proceed with the lecture, I will therefore be putting some emphasis. And in putting the emphasis, I have opted to select one of my not hobbies, but my natural interest on animals. And one of them is a lion and an elephant. And it's not because of their cuteness, the elephant. So I've opted to today either negotiating with both elephants and lions, and then we agreed that for today I will choose an elephant in my making reference and putting emphasis. It is because of how they approach nature, how they respond to environments before them, the elephants. There is one elephant. There may be 2 or 3 elephants I'll be citing as I proceed. I want to do that disclaimer because that was a negotiation between me and nature, and elephants are used for this lecture. Hugh Baton raises one elephant in his health map for urban planners, where he observes that what seems to be an issue is the fact that human ecology lens in the understanding of human settlement is consistently underplayed. We seem to be responding to all other important issues and not placing human beings, when in fact human settlements in the origin of things and in the beginning of humankind were for people. As theologians would also mention that the origins of the Garden of Eden itself was about God placing humans into existence. That human dimension of human settlement is consistently eroded from our engaging of this scholarship and including policy. That's the point that Baton raises in 205. My emphasis is that we need to look into that element of human ecology in our understanding of human on what they are, what they exist for, and what are their functions relative to the needs of human beings, and how those functions are connected and change over time might be what we should be following with the research and also policy making. Understanding the crucial relationship between people and their environment aids in identification of social and environmental elements that sustain their well-being and that of a human settlement. We need to constantly find that crucial relationship between people and their environment, and then identify such social and environmental elements that will sustain the people's or the human well-being in the settlements. And that should be the agenda of human settlement development and management into the futures. That is what Baton, he was proffering a health map for urban planners and was making that emphasis. That is the first elephant that I've found as one has been progressing with this. I'm not to emphasize all of them yet again, but the challenge highlighted by scholars like Matamanda in the study that he pursued in 2019 is the fact that urban planning or traditional urban planning shifted at some point, because there is a view that it was not like that in the beginning, urban planning. But over time, it shifted its focus to be more on physical and spatial configuration of human settlements. Such a consideration, he argues, does not adequately integrate the social components, which mainly focus on the human factors that relate to human settlements. The social component, in my view, is traceable in the history and evolution of human settlements. Where do they come from? How has the settlement been started? For which purposes? How has those purposes shifted over time? Therefore, policy response research should be tracking those to influence public policy in this place. But the trick is that traditional planning, spatial planning methodologies underplay that or neither provide for tools to do just that. Maybe moving also speedily to human settlements. Another issue, another observation by Cohen Shen is around the histories, is that histories themselves, they provide us data and information about distinct languages, cultural features, traditional customs, and the social structure, which represent the most precious and historical cultural resources in a nation. Human settlements, when we tackle them or we engage them as new developments or redevelopments, we should be integrating these elements. But for us to do that, we need to understand the histories and the evolution of human settlements themselves. This is a rich heritage which should be a contribution to tourism sector in a nation which gets lost entirely because human settlements are looked at as just houses and shelter. I think that one area gets lost in the process because of underplaying the human dimension of a settlement. We then lose on heritage, on the rich heritage and cultural resources embedded in these settlements. We will therefore be looking onto landscape architecture as a branch of architectural profession, which, in my view, should reassert its role in modern-day urban planning, more so in relation to the usefulness of the seminal work of Christopher Alexander in 1977, pertaining to the patterns language as Alexander proffered in 1977, and how such inspirations and tools and overall planning and design of human settlement in recent time is considered. Architects understand the language and the view of Christopher Alexander on the patterns language. It's about following the evolution, the history, the evolution of human settlements, tracking those patterns to inform new interventions in those spaces, informed about how the patterns have been shifting and are likely to shift into the future. Landscape architecture should be coming closer to that table I mentioned earlier on. The next profession would be your vernacular architecture as a curriculum of practice, which should redefine its role in human spring and dinner, including housing design and typologies or morphologies, and use of natural resources as this relates to the preservation of historical, cultural, and industrial heritage in the making and remaking of these spaces. This is also equally important for future settlements. There is a contribution, one would call it an input, by vernacular architects in that space, which is seemingly diminishing in the spaces of planning and design of human settlements, which need to be brought back into that space, because that contribution will address the issues of distinct languages, cultural heritage we spoke to. Without that input of vernacular architects, we're likely to see some of the settlements, which include cities, which we are trying to fit ourselves into. They are ours, but we don't belong to them because they represent something that we cannot tell what it is. Vernacular architecture and human settlements have got a role to play in that. Maybe moving speedily again, I just want to, of course, some of the authors, as the Rio Summit mentioned, why did traditional planning shift from what we consider as the social credentials of planning into what seems to be looking on spatial configurations of settlements and cities? It has been found that the emphasis over time has been on market support, supporting the economic growth and development, which is necessary for settlements and as it is, and environmental quality. In my view, you don't need one or the other. You need all. You don't need one or the other. You cannot have, we don't have a luxury at one point of focusing on what the market requires. Yes, the environment quality is equally important, but it may be that we need a more holistic and a coherent approach to human settlements that addresses all the elements equally. Maybe we'll come later to those propositions. Maybe moving to just to move into living landscape architecture, vernacular architecture, and the role of markets in influencing human settlements, planning and design, as has seen the whole emphasis on environmental quality, as we've seen it. I would like us to come to what human settlements are. We spoke about human settlement functions thus far. the forms special confederations and how they arise. But then there has been over time using that data information to provide some structure to human settlement through what is called a hierarchy of human settlements. What we've observed over time with our different approaches and methodologies to human settlement policy and planning has been that our interventions have yielded sprawl. They have yielded, we've been able to define them in line with their functions and form. And where we speak of sprawl, we're able to see that some settlements are displaced and are on the edges of cities. That's what sprawling is about. But there's been a view of looking on human settlement as a compact formation forms. These are monucleated, mixed land uses. Scholars have offered that perhaps as a solution to concentrate on compacting human settlement. And then there has been also the view around containment, that maybe it may be about looking at them as growth centers and growth nodes and managing the development of human settlement within a defined space. Later on, and quite recently, there's been a focus on the eco-city, looking at human settlement in a rich narrative approach that connects a city to its surround and the hinterland, looking at it as within an ecosystems approach. This is what human settlements are currently understood to be or are differentiated across the globe. And therefore, responses are defined around these forms of human settlements. With that, scholars, world banks have therefore offered what we consider as a hierarchy of settlements. Having looked at them in relative to the population size that World Banks was offering, that we can look at settlements as a hierarchy, looking on households, which are isolated dwellings, hamlets, which might be a group of some dwellings in a particular village, but a village which we spoke to earlier on, smart towns, large towns, cities and conurbations, which are more mega cities as it has been. But the understanding that that's the hierarchy. National government policies are have adopted this hierarchy in seeking to understand human settlements and what forms of interventions are required given those levels of human settlements. Maybe it might be useful with that understanding of what human settlements are, how they originated, what purposes of existence they were serving in the beginning, and which they should be serving in the future. Having understood again where are the deficiencies in our engagement of human settlement scholarship itself? What is lacking in that, and what needs to be more emphasized? It might be useful to track very briefly, not in much detail, the policies that underpin human settlement policy planning and design at this point. One of them, I won't be going into much detail on these theories, not policies. Pardon me. I just picked on few policies, dominant theories, that influence human settlement thinking and therefore policy planning, design, and one of them is a systems theory, where we would want to look at human settlements as a system with interacting elements, and therefore use that to explain what human settlements are. These elements being activities in a human settlements. That's one lens we can want to use, the systems theory lens, looking on the activities that are required in a settlement, the communication channels or platforms, the spaces, dwellings, playing fields, factories, business centers. That's what seems to be emphasized by government policies many a times, looking at human settlements as a combination of different functions, and only that. And also looking on channels as streets, railways, and cables. Yes, the systems theory is useful in helping us understand human settlements through these elements. But what has been another shortcoming around the systems theory, again, is a second elephant rising. One of the observable major limitations of the systems theory as a lens to view and explain the phenomenon of human settlement is that of seeing people only from the perspective of activities and their movements, sidelining yet again important sustainability indicators such as health, safety, equity, being in community, and the quality of life. Whilst we engage as scholars, students, and also as policymakers, the system theory, to understand and influence human settlement policy, we must also be cautious that it has got a limitation. My view about the human dimension of a settlement is that that limitation is very deep. It's a very deep one in the sense that what the system theory does, it takes a human being as an equal to any other input. And yet, a human being is an originator of a settlement, and maybe, as we call it, cities themselves today. And yet, human being is a person who decides on how futures should be. System theory is unable, therefore, to deal with that complexity of human being as an input in a system. We need to take note of that because there is a danger embedded in that limitation of the system theory. There is a big danger because it has something to do with the role clarification around which purposes should settlements be developed and redeveloped for. That's the second elephant. We will therefore be moving to another theory speedily, the ecosystem theory. I spoke about the ecosystem theory and as an important theory that influences human settlement scholarship, policy planning, and therefore design. This theory recognizes, also draws from the system theory in some way, but looks at it as a complex open system with living and non-living elements, cyclical processes, and complicated networks of relationship. This theory expresses the elusive nature of human settlements, that's my emphasis, being in constant motion and different elements informing its behavior and never reaching a state of permanency. This is very critical for those who are engaging urbanization, cities, and national governments to understand that the responses to urbanization should be premised with the understanding that in their nature, settlements are not permanent. They are constantly changing. They are constantly changing. They are evolving. Let therefore policymakers not be trapped on the boundaries and the borders of countries and that of cities, because human settlements historically and from the origin of things were never static. I think it's important to note that as we engage all the big issues facing cities, rapid urbanization, in fact, the climate change, the climate studies already point to possible movements of people in South Africa from the area that will be more hotter as we proceed to 2050 to areas which are slightly cooler. And this is already taking place in other parts of the globe. So our planning and design methods should be taking that into account, the human dimension and the decision that human beings make at a point in time around where to settle and why to settle in those spaces. The ecosystem theory, therefore, begins to say that look at it as a complex system in that respect. The other theory, we may just want to touch very briefly, which is also closer to this argument, is the theory of human well-being. While certain theories explain the impact of people on the environment, this theory represents an opposite view, I would say, in my view, of the impact of the environment on people. Look it the other way, flip the coin, and look on the environment and its impact on people. This theory, what is important for us, for human settlement explanation and understanding, is the fact that it draws from the health science research now, the lens of the health science. looking on pathogenesis, which focuses on the cause and effects of diseases, but moving from that from that lens or school of thought to what the health science is looking at as saltogenesis, which is not focusing on the causes and effects of diseases, but which is aimed at discovering the causes of health state of being. What are the causes of a healthy state of being, and how should those causes be sustained, multiplied, amplified for better results, which is human well-being. Health science has shifted as well, and humans still need to learn something from health sciences in that respect. In them engaging what we call looking on urban morphologies, their evolution. We need to look on the other side, flip the coin, look on what would be required to arrive at a settlement that meets the needs of the people, that give them protection, that give them safety. What will be required at a household and community environment level to create to bring into a healthy state of a human well-being. That is different from what I was referring to earlier on as fixing the broken window, as we would call it in the industry. In practice, that is quite different. Looking the other way around in terms of shouldn't we be focusing just on that one? I think I will leave that also again. This view about this ecosystem, the author offers, therefore, which is Peyton again, offers or proffers this expanded healthy human settlement model for consideration. That when you look at it the other way around, you will therefore have the people at the center of your strategy, of your approach to human settlement, and therefore look on the environments and how those environments need to be modified and adjusted to meet the human needs, the human beings in that environment. That's the ecosystems. There are two more dominant theories. One of them is a central place theory for the understanding of human settlement, which seeks to explain now the spatial distribution of cities in terms of size and functions, rather than concentrating on a developed city. The central place theory, various scholars engaged at and policymakers across national governments have made use of the central place theory to understand human settlements and therefore how to look at them. This theory makes use of nodes and centers, which is more an economic theory. It emphasizes on nodes and centers, and perhaps these are what should the concentration of intervention be in response to urbanization. Now, the third elephant rises. This elephant is, as referred by Hansen in 1976, who observed that despite the attempt to explain this theory a better understanding of the spacing, size, hierarchy of human settlement, the theory has got its own limitation as well. This theory assesses localization in its centralization form thought from the perspective of private firms. As I indicated, it is based on an economic theory which puts emphasis on private firms and therefore looking on the nodes where business is actually happening and might be attracting people. It is useful as it is, but it looks on firms. But what it does not do is to consider the social ills or the social cost of agglomeration, because nodes and centers are based on agglomeration theories. What then becomes the social cost of that? That's the view of Hansen some years back. Perhaps almost the last theory I picked up, or close to the last theory, is the growth center theory. The growth center theory is yet another theory widely considered in city planning. The theory emphasizes the urban markets, that urban markets are by and large served by big numbers of people and firms located in close proximity. Economic opportunity, according to Sprenger, is associated with capital and human skills. the land, natural resources, and emphasis, as was the case with the primitive settlement, the growth center theory. However, it is important to also note that the growth centers are not simply urban centers, as we've come to understand, but they are rapidly growing, as many tend to think that they are the urban centers. But we need to consider those centers with the potential for growth as other centers to be looked at in the planning or in the thinking for policy, planning and implementation of human settlement. It cannot only be about the centers as we view them today. Maybe just to move to just on that theory, which is almost the last theory, the other elephant which arises from that. When public and private sector investment focuses on growth centers, we need to also understand that in that there are trade-offs, in particular for developing countries, because there are dire needs in the area of education, health, and other social services. And therefore, developing countries are faced with that tension in policy as to whether to focus on providing for these important requirements, needs, education, health, or to invest on infrastructure. The point being raised here is that it is important that in public policy, these issues are laid bare in the process of policy making and in planning in cities and settlements. They are laid bare to all the stakeholders and all the participants, and that trade-offs are negotiated around this area as well. Where should investment therefore be directed given these challenges? The last theory I want to step off with on these mega theories, on these key major theories influencing is the one, the most, not necessarily the most recent one, but the one which is currently taking central focus. Right now, the International Society of International Planners is meeting in Italy on a conference, and they are dealing with the issue of regenerative cities, maybe as an approach and a response to some of the challenges facing cities today. But this theory is not that of a new theory. As we might note that Howard made a point about regeneration as a critical focus of city planning and urban development broadly. The emphasis here is basically about looking on settlement not just as receivers of impulse, but to look into how processes within the human settlements, how the resources that get into settlements are processed into solutions for the same settlements. This is what this theory, perhaps in simple language, is about, looking on more singular solutions than the linear economic solutions that have been looked at as in response to human settlements. Again, this scholar has therefore offered again some of the characteristics of this theory, regenerative networks. I won't go into detail with it as it is at this point in time, but this theory is one theory that has also influenced the work research work that we are engaged on in the Ndlambe coastal village, where we want to look on the natural environment and its resources as they are: clean water, clean air. We look into clean air. We look into waste management, solid waste management, and clean energy solutions in a settlement. What is it that with regenerative approaches to human settlement does? We want to create natural places and spaces when we take the regenerative approach to cities and settlements. These are places where people play, stay, work, and play. This is about mainstreaming issues, environmental issues into the programs of planning human settlement. A village can be developing utilizing natural resources without harming its environment, creating a win-win, which I call it trade-offs as well, and bringing in smartness into these villages, looking on appropriate information and communication technologies. This is the Green Village approach, which is part of this regenerative movement, and this is what we are testing currently in the Ndlambe Khosan. I won't go into much detail with that as well, but I just want to indicate that dealing with innovations, smart innovations for energy, for water, and addressing issues of waste management in a more innovative manner, in a manner that also triggers or evokes local economic development in those spaces, we're likely to achieve better outcomes in human settlements. And therefore, these stakeholders will be critical in doing that. You will have your researchers, your entrepreneurs are a critical component of regenerative human settlements as we are engaging at the moment. Government, which is about policy and legislation, is critical to support those efforts. And also the important role of communities. Maybe just to step off that one also, or as the last elephant, I believe, number 5. That's far. This is elephants. Elephants need some rest as well. We don't want to abuse nature. Maybe I may just simplify this point as that what seems to be the situation out there. Out includes us as scholars on one hand, practitioners on the other side, influencing or informing policymakers, is the fact that the lacking is the integration. Lacking currently is the integration of the different professional views and concerns. I cited concerns and I apportioned the responsibilities to some professions and disciplines, including architecture, for them to take the share of the blame for the kind of settlements we see evolving in space in our presence. What seems to be an issue is that we seem to be having this contestation of what settlements should be, how they should be driven, whose view should dominate. And this is creating a confusion in the policy space on one hand. What we needed, we need a process that is going to synchronize these views. Environmental quality is equally important. It is important, environmental quality for settlement. It is equally important as safety is equally important. We need a view that brings these different views somehow together. Maybe that's what Doxidos was talking about in 1970. As a science of human settlements, we should be coordinating these different views. Maybe I may take an opportunity to applaud the universities that have introduced human settlement program as an area of study to look at. This program should be bringing together these views, because out there and in the field and on the site, there are battles between professionals of whose voice must dominate. And at the end, the type and the quality of settlements we are looking for are not attained. And this is continuing. Who must best be listened by a minister? Who is the minister listening to more than the other? That is not taking anyone and all of us anywhere, not only in South Africa and across the globe. What is required is a way of integrating the different professional concerns and the discipline. There is a place for health science in human settlement planning and design. We need to bring those together. Maybe as we conclude, we're going to talk very briefly as to how do we do that as we conclude. I don't want to go to the challenges. The paper full paper details these challenges, and these challenges have been narrated in my presentation already, and I may not want to rehash them. They have been presented already. I spoke to the economy, I spoke to the environment, I spoke to the social element of human settlement, which is as we call it the triple bottom line of sustainability. And I've made a point already that the challenge we're facing as nations currently and cities is the fact that there is a contestation of which view must dominate, and there is a danger of governments selecting one view as opposed to the other, and hence the quality of settlements we see outside there, or our inability to respond to urbanization in the manner we should with the limited resources. Of course, there are bigger issues like the economy, stagnation, we understand. But for me, that's not an issue. The issue is what we do with the resources that we have. How much impact are we able to realize with those resources? But the issue sits on our approaches and strategies, as I was beginning to point out on this lecture. I want to gravitate without going through truly all of these challenges, as I've spoken to or alluded to in the process. Issues of capacity, we do know about them. Lack of community engagement. How can there be a lack of community engagement in human settlement planning when a human settlement in its origin is a community of citizens? So how can therefore be an issue about a lack of participation? It is because we've lost the primary purpose of a settlement itself. Hence I'm saying we need not even go to those challenges. But with all the challenges that we seem to understand, as I want to conclude this lecture at this point, it was difficult to do this, to proffer solutions, because I opted to take a more broader approach to human settlement than to look on a single area or element of it that would take me to one or the other of the dominant theories, and therefore and push me to leaning into one or the other professions and not the other. Hence, I wanted to maintain a neutral position and act like God, and yet I'm not one, into looking on the origins of settlements as to what they were made for in the beginning, and how have rigid public policies turned the spaces to something it should not be. Now, that has been a source of the maladies we're facing as nations in settlements, and we created these problems by ourselves, by pushing or marginalizing the human person at the center of a settlement itself, and therefore creating tools and methods to create spaces that cannot be said as to what purposes are these. If I were to ask today, or just ask myself today, what is the purpose, primary purpose of Gqeberha today, and what it is likely to be into the future? Are we going to talk about the citizens when we do that, or we'll be talking about all other important things? Or whether shall we see Gqeberha in 8 years to come as it is, or in a different form as a settlement? Fixing the broken window approach through several policies that address this or not the other, with scholars playing into the game by opting for one theory and not the other, and therefore framing their policy brief around those policies without considering the views of the other scholar and the other discipline, is a problem for nations and certainly development into the future. As I conclude, I think what I was doing that, I was saying that it might be amiss. Maybe I won't do justice to this, but yet still, let me throw some insights on some of the few issues we may want to look at into the future as I conclude the lecture. I think there are a few issues we want just to look at from where we are as nations right now. One of the issues would be that there needs to be a dialogue at a global, national, and local level around a human settlement vision. Let's start from the beginning. What do we want to see of our spaces becoming into the future, with all stakeholders involved? A vision that is bottom up about the purpose. Yes, we see the problems, we understand the problems, we have narrated the problem in research and in policy, but What do you want to see becoming of Johannesburg into the future, or Lagos? That vision cannot be found right now. We need that vision. And unfortunately, that vision won't be coming from one sector or the other. No, one person or the other. It shall be a vision of all about what do we want to see becoming of the spaces we are in as per that hierarchy, be it a village, a small town, a large town, a conubium, or a metropolis. What do we want to see of it? We need that vision with all people participating in that. So the second issue or consideration into the future will be a single national human settlement policy that embraces urbanity and rurality in a single policy. What I've seen across nations, governments right now are different policies and different portfolios, ministries, rural development, urban development, and housing. That's a problem on its own. At a national government level, we require a single policy that deals with the national landscape, with the understanding of how settlements are evolving and how the economy is evolving in that space. Your delegating responsibilities to portfolios should be drawn from that single national policy. Today, there is a contestation around whether focus should be rural or urban, and that contestation is not taking any country and any of us as researchers anywhere and near the globe. It's not helping anyone. We require that as a single policy at a national level. With that, we require human-centered planning tools that consider social, economic, and environmental impact assessments alike. I made this point earlier on. The social credentials of planning are not on environmental impact assessments. All those who work in human-centered space understand EIAs, environmental impact assessment. We will not create sustainable settlements in the future if the focus remains on the environment as viewed from the perspective of how people impact on the environment, not the environment on people. Putting that aside, we require EIAs, environmental impact assessment, but not only them. At a planning level, we require social impact assessments. We require those economic impact assessment, and those are not legislated and should be legislated across national governments if we aim to deliver sustainable development in our spaces. With that in place, we'll have to increase the role of local government in driving a human settlement agenda. With the multi-level governments and the contestation on public policy in those levels, within the bureaucracy, it has been found, and I found it also, that local government is a better space to drive sustainable development, which seems to be lacking capacity at this point in time across different nations, most of developing countries. And this is so because capacity is kept in the other levels of government, which should be placed at a local government sphere. With limited resources, you move capacity and resources to where it matters, which is local government. The focus into the future should be local government because that's where people are. We will require also a transformative sustainability leadership for human settlements into the future. A leadership that is visionary, ethical, and capable, but with a single agenda of driving sustainable development, with no aim or intention to lean on one view or the other, but to embrace all other views to bring into sustainable settlements and therefore development. That leadership has to emerge and to drive the new visions we spoke to earlier on. For now, we don't have that leadership at this point in time, certain leadership, and we might require that. Maybe proceeding to 2030 with the SDGs. As I looked at them, I found a gap in them as well, that there is a limited emphasis on the role of leadership in driving certain development. And maybe if we were to say that we're going to proceed with the 17 SDGs, we might have to add another one on sustainability leadership as a key component of sustainable development, because for now, we don't have one. Let me emphasize this point in a minute in saying that we need a leadership that stands for human well-being. A leadership that's going to embrace social, economic, and environmental requirements. A leadership that won't lean on one view, including markets and communities. We need that leadership, more like a neutral leadership. If we have it, well and good, and we need to build upon that leadership. But into 2030 and beyond, we shall require that one to move forward. Perhaps the other issue I spoke to earlier on is a transformative territorial framework for scholars themselves. We supervise students at master level. We guide them on the theoretical foundation of their studies. We do that as scholars, yes. At times we make mistakes as well. And I'm inviting students at doctoral level to look very closely when they pursue research on human settlement, in that they don't lean on one theory without examining it closely, its limitations, because those studies won't realize the impact they intended because of the limitations embedded on these theories. It may well be that you'll require a combination of theories that will bring in the type of results you look for in your study. Maybe the almost last one is that I spoke to the National Property and Land Register. I believe we spoke about land uses as an origin of settlement from the beginning. Archaeologists point to that. They are built on land. Land was a resource. But countries and cities don't know which land is available for human settlements, what it is currently used for, who owns it. Some cities don't even know that the buildings have been abandoned, meaning they don't collect rates and taxes, or they do, but not the manner they should be doing it. Because when you know where your money comes from, you should know when somebody is no longer there. But then it will be important at an international government level for a single national register of land to be developed and be in place and be accessible to the publics as well. Which land is available in which area? What is it currently used for? Perhaps what could its better uses into the future? The other issue I may want to raise is that of capacity. As I'm going to conclude, as in conclusion, the issue of capacity. And I've made emphasis on local government as a site for driving sustainable development to the future. Despite the multi-level structures of government, which we understand why are they kept in that manner, given our histories of uneven development as well in our countries. But we need to gravitate towards strengthening local government to drive human settlement, but then address capacity. Capacity not as skills only. Yes, capacity in my view. I've got this taxonomy of capacity as tangible resources and intangible requirements to develop a capability for local government to drive some development. And that capability will be about your tangible resources of skills, knowledge, materials, finances, and logistics, and the other. But the truth is that you need the other. In the presence of tangible resources in capacity, we don't build human sustainable. We are challenged with SDGs right now. What are the intangible requirements? These requirements are political stability, ethical leadership at local government level to drive development, willingness to serve by all in that space, a culture of excellency, consequence management is required. These are said to be soft areas of capability, but we've seen in practice that you may have all the engineers, quantity surveyors, urban planners, and work does not happen, or wrong work happens in their presence. You require also the intangible requirements of capacity in your framing of your capacity development strategies as a country. And then I conclude in proffering the regenerative human settlements approach to South Africa and Africa, that moving forward, it might be useful for us to look on the environment in its totality, to assess the behavior of the environment in totality, economic, social, environmental in totality, to look on natural resource depletion and engage human settlements and cities with that view of regeneration and renewal of these settlements. And when we do that, I will request all of us to place humans at the center of our efforts, as Mandela University as well, and other universities, the scholars, policymakers, community members, the private sector. Your existence is based or is anchored on the existence of human beings. When we do this together, taking the regenerative agenda forward, we are likely to see some improvements in our space. On that note, I would want to thank Mandela University for according me this opportunity, which I never thought that it will arise on some day, for me to be standing here and delivering this inaugural lecture. For me, it is an honor, not just a privilege, that I'm doing it with the name of Nelson Mandela behind me is something that is precious, and I will take forward in my strides into the future. I thank you, the university. Thank you, Acting Vice Chancellor.
Prof, I hope you saw that you got a standing ovation. Deputy Vice Chancellors, Executive Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, the Built Environment and Technology, Professor Marshall Sheldon, Executive Deans of Faculty, Deputy Deans present, colleagues from the Faculty of Engineering, the Built Environment and Technology, and in particular the Department of Building and Human Settlements in the School of the Built Environment and Civil Engineering, our professoriate, and all members of the Academy here present, members of senior management, MEC Sipokazi Lusiti, we've seen you, students, alumni and alumni association, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, molweni, goeienaand, sanibonani, tumelang. Professor Mbanga is an esteemed and well-respected scholar in his field, and this is a very successful celebratory occasion is testament to that claim. His lecture tonight made a case on the structure and behavior of human settlement systems, including the processes that underlie the ever-changing patterns of human settlement. Professor Mbanga, you took us through a theoretical framework, and you also took us through contemporary challenges that we are faced with, and some of us could relate to those challenges. You also made proposals and suggestions for scholars, policymakers, and practitioners by also talking about interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, and transdisciplinarity would be a solution to our problems. You also problematized urbanization as a factor that compounds informal settlements and slums. Your critique of a lack of integrated and coherent view between policy and practice is well taken. I've learned something new this evening. The science of human settlement, and I'm sure many of you do. Acoustics. Maybe we must introduce acoustics. A Bachelor of Acoustics. Given that this has been one of the recurring themes around service delivery protests, I think there is appreciation across the border socio-political spectrum about the body of research, work, and practice that institutions such as ours can contribute, all in a bid to address what has become an urgent national priority. I have certainly enjoyed listening to you, Professor Mbanga, and the many insights you shared that should not only become part of the broader research agenda, but also shape as well as deepen the national discourse on human settlement. It should not only end at the dialogue stage, as you said, but become a call to action for the betterment of our society. Please receive my sincerest thanks on behalf of the university community for this insightful, compelling, and timely inaugural lecture. I would also like to congratulate you on behalf of the President of the Alumni Association and officially welcome you into the Alumni Association. I would also like to thank those who have been watching these proceedings virtually. I thank the staff who have been working behind the scenes to make this occasion a success. Prof, thank you for the heartfelt message that you shared with your mother. It was very touching and very inspiring. We really thank that. We'd also like to thank, on behalf of Professor Mbanga, all the people who have attended this evening. I'm not going to mention you now by name because you've been mentioned mostly in the beginning. So I don't want to just repeat the names again, but the family, friends, teachers, supervisors, colleagues, students, you are really thanked by Professor Mbanga because he believes that if you were not here, this wouldn't have been successful. And if you were not in his life, supporting him through this journey up to this point, that he would have felt alone. Professor Mbanga, on behalf of the entire university, we congratulate you on your outstanding achievement. Being promoted to the level of a full professor is a huge milestone and a solid affirmation by your peers of your lifelong work. The Platform Party will take leave as we invite the rest of you to join us for light refreshments in the foyer. The academic procession will now leave the venue, and I request the audience to stand while the procession leaves the room. Thank you. Thank you, Prof.